Hello and welcome, this is Cheryl. Thank you so much for joining me today. In this video, I'm sharing some foil and die cut magic using the new Classic Mouse Wedding collection. We have the Classic Mouse Wedding die set. Now, the past Classic Mouse collections have needed the Steamboat Willie duo. This one doesn't. The graduation one that I've shared previously also doesn't. So this is a die set all on its own that can be used on its own, but there is a Classic Mouse Wedding accessories die set, as well as a Classic Mouse Wedding press plate and die set for sentiments, as well as the Happiest Place press plate and die set. So I'm going to use those press plate and die sets with my glimmer machine to foil. I thought it would create a really nice, elegant look to go with these wedding cards. I'm doing the background and sentiments in both matte silver foil as well as black foil. That black foil is just perfect for the Classic Mouse Happiest Place press plate as well as the sentiments. And the silver foil is just going to create a more subtle background. So I have my glimmer machine hot here. I'm using some Hammermill Cardstock. I stack it with the pretty side of the foil facing down, the Hammermill Cardstock on top of that, the plates on top of that, press the timer button on my glimmer machine, and then once that timer button has stopped blinking, we put it through the die cutting machine. You need the heat from the glimmer machine and the pressure from the die cutting machine in order to do that foiling. Done doing my regular foiling, I'm also going to use a solid hot foiling plate and foil the negative pieces or the leftovers from that foil. Sometimes I like to use those pieces for mats on my cards. Sometimes those solid hot foil pieces, I'll just use them as specialty cardstocks when I'm doing different things with die cuts. And when it comes to the sentiments, sometimes the solid hot foiled sentiments just suit the project a little bit better. So I always love having all of those options ready to go when I'm creating. And any leftovers that I have that I don't use for these projects, I'll just put them in a Ziploc bag, the sentiments in a Ziploc bag, store them with this press plate and die set, and it might work perfectly for future projects. So this press plate, the sentiments one here, creates 5 different sentiments all at once. I'm creating 4 cards, so I'm not going to be using all of the sentiments, but it's always nice to have sentiments ready to go for future projects. So I'll save them in a Ziploc bag with that packaging, because next time I'm going to be using that particular set, I'll have all the ones or all of the options that I have ready-made, ready to go there. And again, it might work with a future project. So I'm done my regular foiling. This is my solid hot foiling plate here. The stacking for solid hot foiling is exactly the same as regular foiling. We're just replacing that first foil plate with that solid hot foil plate. The process is exactly the same. You put the stacking on your glimmer machine, press that timer button, and once that timer button is done, we can put it through the glimmer machine. When I'm using the solid hot foil plate, especially for that first foiling, I do let it heat up for just a little bit longer. There's a lot more metal to that plate, so I do want to make sure that it's completely heated up before I finish and put it through my die cutting machine. But again, the process is exactly the same. If by chance I don't use any of the backgrounds that I'm creating for this project, I'll just save them, because it's much easier to save those solid hot foiled backgrounds than to save the negative foil. That foil is pretty flimsy and would get damaged really, really quickly. So it's much easier to save the solid hot foiled pieces on that cardstock. So once I have my regular backgrounds done, I'm going to do both of those sentiment pieces at the same time and then put them through the machine. When it comes to foiling, if I have any overfoiling or any imperfections, the first thing I like to do is use some Best Ever craft tape to remove and clean up that foiling. You can also use a sand eraser, but that Best Ever craft tape is a lot more gentle. So I'll use the thicker one. I will put it on my shirt or pants a couple times just to remove some of the sticky, and then I'll just put it right over the pieces of my sentiments or my foiled images that are a little bit overfoiled, making sure to lift it up. And often, even if it doesn't look like there's any overfoiling, I'll just do it over all of the sentiments anyways, because it really cleans it up. And sometimes you don't see the overfoiling, but when you look at the back of the tape, you can see that it's lifted up some extra foil. So especially with those sentiments, when there's a lot of fine detail, I do find that using that Best Ever craft tape over top of it just totally cleans them up and makes them look really, really nice. Once I have them cleaned up, I'm going to use the coordinating die set, and I'm going to die cut all of my sentiments. I love that you have all of these sentiments that get foiled at once, and then we have all of these sentiments that get die cut at once. It makes it super, super easy. So when I tape my sentiments, I will use the same Best Ever craft tape, but I use the thinner one, and those pieces will get used multiple times till they don't really stick anymore. So I get a lot of use out of my tape. Once I have those taped in place to make sure they're not going to move on me, I put it through my die cutting machine, and now we have easily 5 different sentiments ready to go. Off screen, I'm going to do the die cutting for the other pieces. So I'll have all of my sentiments ready to go, ready to just pick and choose. And I can pick and choose exactly which one is going to work best for the project that I'm doing. The very first card that I'm creating is going to be a super simple one. I'm going to be using my foiled Happiest Place background as well as the negative foiled. And I'm going to use the negative foiled one for one of the layers. I'm using the Playful Stitched Panels die set, and I'm going to create card bases for all of the cards that are shaped. I'm using the two different shaped backgrounds, so the Playful Stitch Panels as well as the Essential Arches die set. I love using that Essential Arches for card backgrounds. I think it's such a unique shape, but I think it works perfect here for wedding cards. So I start with my smallest piece first, then I can glue it to the solid hot foiled background to match up those patterns totally. Then once that is dry, and it's going to take just a little bit longer to dry because of that foiling, I'm going to place my next piece down, tape it in place, and then die cut that. This is just an easy way to make sure that I have my patterns matching. And for those Playful Stitch panels, there's quite a bit of difference between the different panel sizes. So the ones that I'm using here is the second largest and third largest. The largest one is going to be used to create my card back. So off screen, I die cut 2 of those out of white cardstock, and I'm going to score them. I think it's about 3.5 inches that I score. I typically will score about a 1/2 inch to 3/4 of an inch from the top. Then I make sure that fold line is nice or a score line is nice and pressed. Then I glue those 2 pieces together using my liquid glue, making sure that all of my edges match. The last step here is to add that layer to the top of it. Now, I didn't do any ink blending to start, but once I put these pieces together, I kind of thought it looked a little bit plain. So I opted to add just a little bit of subtle color using some spun sugar distress ink. So I chose one sentiment. This one says Once Upon a Time, and it lightly ink blended on top of that. Then I glued it to the front of my card, and you can see that it just adds a really nice pop of color. It makes that sentiment stand out. Then I let that dry, and I use that same color to do a little bit of ink blending around the outside of the card. Now, I did clean off my mat between doing different ink blending. I don't want to have any of the ink still on the mat stick onto the back of my card. So I do clean my mat off regularly between cards or between different ink blendings. You can't really tell because my mat is so well loved that it's got a lot of ink staining on it, but it doesn't affect the use of the mat at all. So I added that subtle color around the outside edge. I wanted it to be nice and light. I wanted it to be a hint of color to just enhance that Happiest Place background. I didn't want to add bright color, but you certainly could if you want, if you were trying to match something. Now, to add just a touch of texture, I'm just using a little bit of stickles on some of the details on one of the images here. This doesn't add any color to it, but it just adds that little bit of sparkle, that little bit of shimmer. Then I set that aside to dry. For my second card, this one is another fairly simple one. This time I'm using the Essential Arches die set for my card base. I have 2 of the largest ones die cut here. I score about a 1/2 inch or 3/4 of an inch from that top, fold that score line to make sure that it's nicely scored in place, and then glue those 2 together. For this card, as well as my last card, I'm going to be using 2 of the arches from the Arch Punch and Pierce plate. This one cuts 3 different arches at the same time. For this one here, I'm going to use the middle-sized one. For my last card, I'm going to be using the large-sized one. I thought it made a really nice arch for wedding cards. I thought it suited it really nicely. To die cut those pieces, I die cut them out of antique white treasured cardstock for a little bit of shimmer. This has a little bit of a subtle gold shimmer to it that I thought worked really nicely with those arches. I have one of the smaller arches used to die cut my matte silver foiled Happiest Place background for the center there, and I have one of the sizes in between, just a little bit bigger than that medium punch and pierce arch, die cut out of Wildberry cardstock for a little bit of extra color. For some of the details for this card, I used the rings from the Classic Mouse Wedding accessories. I have them die cut out of gold mirrored cardstock. And then I have the little diamond die cut it out of antique white glitter cardstock. So it's got some nice shimmer to it. I really liked the look of that spun sugar distress around the outside of the last card. So I opted to do it around the outside edges of this one, just to add that little hint of color and frame that card in. And I chose pinks for these, but you can obviously choose any color that you want to coordinate with, say, the colors of the wedding or whatnot. So once I have this done, my card is done. It's super, super simple. I wanted to add just a little bit of extra dimension. So on top of the diamond in the ring, I'm adding a little bit of glossy accent. So we're not only going to see that glitter from that glitter cardstock, but we're also going to see the shine and dimension on top of that. So once that is on there, I'm just going to let that completely dry. And then again, a nice simple card, but we got that shine from the foiled background. We also have some shine from those die cut rings, as well as the glitter from the diamond and the shine on top of that. For my last two cards, I'm going to be using the Classic Mouse Wedding Day die set. There is a ton of dies in this set. So once I'm done die cutting, when I'm assembling, I like to lay everything out on my desk. So I have all of the pieces in place. I can make sure that I have them all. And I can start to assemble, just picking and choosing which pieces. And I'll typically start from top to bottom or bottom to top, just depending on my particular mood. I like to use liquid glue in a fine line bottle. It works perfectly for assembling the die cuts. It also gives you that little bit of wiggle room. Because there are so many pieces here, I sometimes will make a mistake thinking about which one should go in which order. You can see that I put the dress on and then realize that it covers the shoes a little bit. So it's going to be much easier to have the dress off when I put the shoes on the bottom. So having a liquid glue is quite helpful for that. It gives you that little bit of wiggle room to move and shimmy things in place, as well as lift items up if you happen to put them down before you need to. Now for the base of my classic mouse here, I have them done out of Raven cardstock and classic white cardstock. For the outfit, I have them done out of different treasured cardstock. So the dress here is antique white treasured cardstock in the pearl finish. This is the same cardstock that I used for those arches. It has that beautiful gold shimmer to it. There's also the brushed finish that almost looks like satin that I think would be beautiful here as well. I used a little bit of vellum for the veil to give it that transparent look. And then for the headpiece as well as the tie on the dress, I used rose gold treasured cardstock in the pearl. It has more of a pink look to it, but it has that beautiful pearl finish that I think works really perfect for wedding pieces. There's the bouquet here that I have die cut out of some rainforest cardstock as well as wildberry cardstock. I'm going to glue that into the hand and then set that aside to dry. For this outfit here, I have the silver pieces die cut out of silver treasured cardstock in that pearl finish. The black is actually the onyx treasured cardstock, but in the brushed finish. It has like a silk satin look to it that I really, really love. So I have that for the suit and the hot top hat. And then I have some of the accent pieces out of that silver. Now this is one where both times that I created it, I did one off screen so it was ready to go, and then one on screen. I found that I kept forgetting which pieces went behind and which went above or in front. So this is where it's really helpful to have that little bit of wiggle room from liquid glue to move and shimmy things in place. I also find this wax tip tool from Spellbinders, this is in the handy tool set, really handy for those tiny, tiny die cuts, for those little tiny pieces like the center of the bow. For just there's some little tiny pieces here that I find it really, really helpful for, because your fingers get in place. Even when you're using reverse tweezers, sometimes they get in the way. So having a tool that just picks it up is quite handy. So once I have these pieces together, I will let them dry for a few moments just to make sure that that glue is nice and solid and dried in place. The pieces are actually, once you've done it once, it's fairly easy to, I think it took longer really to die cut all of the pieces than it does to assemble them. But I do know that because there's so many pieces, it can get a little bit overwhelming having them all there. I find that laying them out and having them laid out so you can see everything, you know that you have everything, makes it really quick and easy. Because you can also see as you're assembling them, there's less and less pieces to go. So it just takes that little bit of overwhelm away. Once you have them done though, when you have die cut pieces like this that have so many different pieces to them, they have so much more detail to them. I think they're so much more impressive. So I think it's definitely worth it. I know die cuts are not everyone's cup of tea, but when you have something that has all of this extra detail to it, I totally think it's totally worth it. So once I have those together, I'll set them aside. I like to put an acrylic block on top of it just to hold everything together nice and flat, especially since we have lots of pieces here going together. That acrylic block there, I can see that to make sure that nothing has moved on me, and I know that it's gluing together nicely. These are the treasured cardstock packs that I have used here. There's a lot of them, I know, and you can use just regular cardstock if you want, but because this was a wedding theme, I thought some of those different metallic finishes really suited the theme. For the background for this card, I'm using that Playful Stitches panels. I have 2 white pieces for my card base, and I have another white piece here that I'm using with the favorite song embossing folder. I thought this would be a beautiful embossing folder for a wedding themed card. So I have that die cut. I'm going to use that same spun sugar on that background just to add a little hint of color around the edges. You could definitely go over the entire thing if you wanted to have a full colored background. I want that color on that background just around the edges. I want our Classic Mouse Wedding duo there to be the focus of the card, but I do think that the hint of color around the edge just really frames it in nicely and just gives it a nice finish to it. So I have 2 of those Playful Stitch panels for my card base here. I'm going to score a little bit from the top, about a 1/2 to 3/4 of an inch from that top. I had a little bit of tape from die cutting stuck to the back there, so I want to take that off. I want to make sure we don't have that tape on the back of our card. Glue those 2 pieces together. Make sure that all of those bits and pieces are lined up together. You can see I have a little bit of tape on the back of this here as well, but this is going to get glued to the front of the card. We're never going to see that tape on there, so I didn't bother taking that off because it's going to be hidden. Once we have our embossed piece on our card, we can add our wedding duo to the front. Now the hands are made so that you can interlock them. So I'm doing that for this card, having those hands interlocked. You can see that the tails just come a little bit outside of the card. So you could, if you wanted, put it into a little bit bigger of an envelope. It doesn't come out a lot, so it might not even be an issue for an A2 envelope, but just a tiny little bit outside. Then I added one of the sentiments to the bottom, and I want to add just a touch more texture to it. So I'm just putting a little bit of stickles on top of the flowers in the bouquet and on top of the headpiece. Now, when you use these stickles, I'm using some that are opalescent but transparent, so we still see the cardstock underneath. We're not changing that color in any way. It's just adding a little bit of extra sparkle, a little bit of extra shimmer, and just adds a little bit more texture. So for my last card, I'm once again using that Classic Mouse Wedding duo, the die. I'm also creating an arched background for this one. For the embossed background, I'm using the Regal Lattice embossing folder. This has 2 different finishes to it. One has a lattice part, one side has a lattice part, the other side has an embossed arch that works really, really nicely with the Arches die set, as well as the Arch Punch and Pierce plate. And I'm going to use the largest of that Arch Punch and Pierce plate here. This is it already die cut. That once again is die cut out of the pearl finish from the antique white treasured cardstock. So you can see why it has a different look to it from the white cardstock there. Just adding a little bit of that spun sugar distress on top of that emboss just to bring out those flowers on the arch. Another option I think would be really nice is to use some floral and vine dies and add that to the background. I wanted my background to have those details, but I wanted them to be a little bit more subtle so that our Classic Mouse Wedding duo on the front was the part that got attention. The rest of it is a bit more of supporting, if you will. So I left it really, really subtle and just did some light ink blending so those flowers would come through in the background. Once I have that onto my card base, I'm going to add that Arch Punch and Pierce die cut and let that sit to dry. So I have our Classic Mouse Wedding duo here already assembled. I did them in different colors from the first card. The wedding dress is the same cardstock, but I did the suit in different cardstock. So the suit here is out of that silver matte cardstock, and then the vest and other details, that tealy color, is aquamarine cardstock in the matte finish. For this card, I'm using some different accessories from the Classic Mouse Wedding accessories die set. So we have some wedding bells, some champagne glasses, as well as the details from a champagne bottle die cut out of matte silver cardstock. The little bell details are die cut out of pearl silver cardstock, and the champagne bottle is just some rainforest cardstock there. I'm going to glue the ribbon part here right onto the arch so that we don't have too much of our background covered. This is the rose gold cardstock with the pearl finish, so it has more of a pink look to it, and I chose to do this cardstock as some of the accents for one of our wedding dresses. The other wedding dress has the rose gold in the glitter finish for some of the details. So I like using the different finishes to them. It just adds a little bit of, takes it to the next level, shall we say. So once I have the tails, I add the other pieces to that bow, putting the bells underneath it. Then we can add our duo to the front and put the champagne glasses in their hands as well as the champagne bottle. So when I'm gluing these pieces, there's a lot of pieces gluing it together. So I make sure to add glue to the pieces that are going to have contact with the background. And I don't necessarily push it down onto my background until I have all of the pieces in place. I want to make sure that I have a little bit of wiggle room to move and tuck things underneath there. So you can see I'm quite generous with there because I want to make sure that we have good contact with that background. And because part of that background is embossed, there are some areas that are recessed that are not going to have good contact. So trying to make sure that there's a good amount of glue to the background. So once we have our bottle and glasses in place, we can add a sentiment to the bottom here. And again, it can work with many of the different sentiments. Last step here, once again, I'm going to add a little bit of stickles. I'm going to put some out of the champagne bottle, like it's a little bit overflowing, and then some on the cardstock on the glasses, and then let that completely dry. You'll find all of the things that I'm using listed and linked down in that description box below. So if there's something that I haven't mentioned, that information might be in that description box below. Sometimes there's a lot of detail going on, and I sometimes forget a few things as I'm going. There is that finished card there. I love that arched background with it, and I think it looks really well, or works really well with that bow and the little bells. Then we have our third card that is done with the playful stitch backgrounds with that favorite song embossing folder in the background. Very, very simple but elegant background. It doesn't take any focus off of our classic mouse wedding duo on the front. Then our save the date card, again, an arched shape card. And these could be just regular A2 cards as well. You don't necessarily have to do shaped cards, but I do love them because they have a unique look to them and they're really simple to do. Our very first card with the Once Upon a Time, I think it's absolutely adorable and super, super simple. Thank you so much for joining me today. I really appreciate all the time that you spend with me. I hope you have a fantastic day.